part of Double P Media, doublepmedia.com.
This is part 2 of our Season 5, Episodes 7 through 9 coverage of The Crown. If you're looking for part 1, go back 1 episode.
Is what Martin Bashir did to get that interview with Diana inappropriate?
What decisions should heads of programming have made in regards to the Panorama interview?
And is episode 9 just a sad version of when Harry met Sally?
We'll answer those questions and more on this review of The Crown, Season 5, Episodes 7 through 9, in our spoiler-filled edition of Podcast Lilibet, which begins now. We're covering the most recent season of The Crown. Make sure that you've watched it before you listen. You've been warned. The wheel has landed on what about William? This is the episode where I think where I was getting more at where I felt like he seemed a little bit like Charles when he would like cut Diana off, which, you know, I'd have been the same way if I'd have been a kid and my mom was telling me about a new guy. I'd be like, I don't want to know about this. I really don't want to know about this, Mom. Can we talk about something else? Or can I just go, you know, be me for 5 minutes? I don't know. We have already talked about William a lot. So if there's anything else that anybody wants to say, feel free to do so here. And if not, we'll spin the wheel again.
Well, I liked that very introduction scene with William and the Queen, where they were talking about the television, and you know, he was encouraging her to get something new. And one of my favorite lines here was when she said, "Even the televisions are metaphors in this place." I really like that. And then one other little detail I'd like to mention is that there was a particular, one of the great things about The Crown is that they have all these wonderful actors that sometimes come in and play little bit parts and so forth. And I noticed the actor who they had coming in and playing the professor at Eton is an actor by the name of Blake Ritson. And for anybody who is a fan of Jane Austen and the dramatic adaptations of Jane Austen, they'll be familiar with him. He's played both villains and romantic leads in some of those. So anyways, was playing the role of the professor, and they showed him kind of in the background as William was watching the interview with Diana, and in some additional reading that I had done after the episode, it was noted that this particular professor was someone that I guess was fairly close to both William and Harry when they were at Eton, and that he had taken William aside and watched that interview with him so that he wouldn't be alone when they knew it was going to be something that was kind of controversial that was going on.
Fascinating. Okay, I didn't know that at all. So that's wild. You mentioned a moment with grandmother that was your favorite. Can I put this one out there? The fact that she's more worried about what the satellite dishes will look like up on the palace of the royal palace. This is the kind of thing that a grandmother worries about. Not whether she'll get better TV or not, but how will can we hide the satellite dishes? That's right. The important thing. I loved that. Baba, any last thoughts on William?
No, love the portrayal. Love that we now know he's Dominic West's son. And, I'm talking about, do you notice any traits from the mom or the dad in him? I'm looking at traits now to see, has he got any McNulty in him? Got any of his dad's acting tricks in him? So I'll be watching very close in episode 10.
Yes, there you go. There you go.
Bum, 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 bum. We have another important debate. The only debates that we can talk about.
When it comes to the differences between Marmaduke and John Burt, how should they have set up this programming for the Panorama interview in light of what they did do?
Bubba, I'll give you dibs.
Okay. The BBC, and now I'm an American, I could mess this completely up, but the BBC is paid for by British and United Kingdom tax members, right? It's not paid by commercials. It's not something where you have to chase ratings and eyeballs to get the ad rates to be expensive enough to where you can afford this expensive operation of running a news bureau and a worldwide news bureau. So in this particular case, the way it should be done is the way the show implied it was done. The news director always makes the call, not the suit, the news director, the journalist. And so in this case, it was handled perfectly well. Marmaduke, get back to the funny pages, leave this to the journalist. That's how it should be done. Case closed. Okay, next episode. Oh, wait, Matt, you get to talk too. All right, let's hear it.
I can't believe you would diss Auntie like that. I mean, this is like just it's practically just, like slaughtering a family member. If it were not for the royal charter, the BBC would not exist to be able to soak up taxpayer money. I mean, the taxpayers are so worried about the yacht. Why do they want to fund something that is taking up all of these space with silly, frivolous, tabloid information, letting some girl destroy Auntie on national television, getting world attention against Auntie's beloved son, who I guess in this instance metaphorically would be
Andrew?
cousin.
Oh.
And so that is, cousin Charles does not deserve this. And therefore, it is very possible that you have just killed Auntie with this decision. How do you feel now?
Well,
You have a response?
yeah. God save the queen. And he did. She survived. So it obviously didn't kill her.
God wouldn't have to save the queen if the BBC had not run that darn interview.
You know what? You can watch something else. I'm pretty sure there's something called Channel 4 there.
ITV. Yes, ITV4.
I'm sure they were showing. I'm sure they were showing.
By the way, they were the ones
program.
who showed, it was ITV who were the ones who showed Charles's little thing with Dimbleby.
Right. And it always had so many commercial breaks. It was brutal to watch. Charles, how do you feel about this? Well, I'll tell you, right after this ad for British soap.
Don't forget Benny Hill at 10.
Benny Hill. Exactly. If they had played the Benny Hill theme during Charles's interview, would have gone over great. Not 50%, but 100% approval ratings.
They needed to play the Benny Hill overview over Diana's interview or under Diana's interview because they were killing Auntie.
Oh.
Here are your history notes for Season 5, Episode 8, Gunpowder. Marmaduke Dookie Hussey was appointed the chairman of the BBC in 1986 upon the death of Stuart Young, thanks in part to close connections to the ruling Conservative Party. He served 2 terms in the role until 1996. Source: Wikipedia. John Burt served as Director General at the BBC from 1992 to the year 2000. His roles included overseeing the BBC's involvement with online and digital services and restructured further by separating broadcasting and commissioning. His reforms and management style were unpopular among staff, but he is credited with securing the BBC's future in the digital era with a favorable charter and license fee settlement. Source: BBC Research. The royal charter that Debicki refers to is a document that must be redrawn over a period of time to keep the BBC in operation. The charter referred to in this episode actually refers to the 1997 charter, which was negotiated and approved in May of 1996. Sources: the BBC and parliamentary publications. Guy Fawkes Night, also known as Guy Fawkes Day, Bonfire Night, and Fireworks Night, is an annual commemoration observed on the 5th of November, primarily in Great Britain. It commemorates the date in 1605 when Guy Fawkes, a member of the Gunpowder plot, was arrested while guarding explosives the plotters had placed beneath the House of Lords. The Catholic plotters had intended to assassinate Protestant King James I and his Parliament. Celebrating that the king had survived, people lit bonfires around London, and months later, the observance of the 5th of November Act mandated an annual public day of thanksgiving for the plot's failure. Source: Wikipedia. The 67th Royal Variety Performance occurred on November 20th, 1995. It was hosted by Des O'Connor and featured Carol Kenyon, Bruce Forsyth, Alan Stewart, Robson and Jerome, and the Pendragons, to name a few. It aired on ITV on November 25th, 5 days later. Source: Wikipedia. The Panorama interview was filmed on November 5th, 1995, and aired 15 days later on November 20th. In addition to Bashir, Panorama producer Mike Robinson and a cameraman, Tony Poole, were also present. The program did air on the same night of the Royal Variety Performance and the night of Elizabeth and Philip's wedding anniversary. Source: Wikipedia and Math. It is absolutely time to check in with our feedback because we got lots of feedback to discuss this week. We've got some great YouTube comments. We're going to go through all of the reviews. Why are we doing all of this? Because all of these people are included in our contest, including any feedback that we've received or read on the podcast this season, covering season 5. So you're all entered into the contest. Remember, you must submit feedback by February 6th of 2023 in order to be included in our contest. So we want to hear from you. Tweet to @LilibetPod. Send emails to mattsaudioblog@gmail.com. Leave comments on the Double P Media YouTube. By the way, hit subscribe and like and hit that bell, yo, as our friend John likes to say, for all you youngsters on the YouTubes. Just do that. Get your notifications because Double P Media is going to be having all kinds of great programming content all throughout the year, and you're going to want to hear what Bubba and Catfish have to say before you hear anybody else say anything. That is for certain. Bubba, do you want to help me go through some of this feedback real quick?
Yeah, Matt, let's roll.
All right. Let's start with, I guess it was last week's YouTube where we were talking about the revenge dress, and we wondered the fact that she knew that the interview was coming because the dress happened on the same day, or whether it was something else that triggered the revenge dress. And Marcia Mariner, that's Marcia Mariner 7897 said that maybe it was just revenge for what Charles did to her in order to show him up. Now, Susan, I know that you have many regrets about all of the terrible things you said in last week's podcast. Is there anything you want to say addressing this?
Yes, I had done some reading after we had our conversation, and what we were kind of contemplating was it a revenge dress in relation to his interview that was upcoming? Because if the interview hadn't played yet, how would she know what he was going to say in it? Or was it a response to the article about the conversation between him and Camilla? And what I did find out in doing a little further reading about this revenge dress was that there had been some articles, information that had leaked out about what was going to be in Charles's interview. So she had kind of a heads up about what was going to be said. And that was part of what spurred her taking this particular point and going out that night to this event and showing up in a very stunning dress to just be kind of like, I could care less type of attitude.
So
shout out to They Might Be Giants. It was pre-venge.
It was pre-venge. There you go. Now, Susan, I was wrong, but you are the one who's getting fired. So as you leave this podcast, do you have any other considerations that you need to make, or apologies that you need to make for distributing false information, fake news on this podcast?
That's right. Feedback for the last week's episode. Yes. In looking back over and thinking about what I had to say when I was talking about all that history in relation to Windsor Castle, I was talking about Edward III, one of the medieval kings, quite a bit. And I said that he was the one that had the famous nickname of Longshanks, but actually I was wrong. That was Edward I, not Edward III. So I thought I'd better clear that up.
So fired, you will be fired effective March 1st of 2029. March 1st, 2029 shall be your last day. So,
all right.
Just beware. Get your stuff together at your drawer and get ready to get rid of it. Thank you for correcting that information, Susan. I really appreciate you showing us the light, because I wouldn't have known the difference one way or another for the rest of my life. But thanks to you, I do now, and can't find you for it.
Yeah, I didn't want you to have to, worry about getting tons of mail about that particular issue.
Now, Bubba, we have a great double L.
Loyal listener, that's right.
Yes.
We've got Donut Buzzcut on YouTube. Donut Buzzcut has given great feedback on multiple shows we cover on Double PHQ. And so let's read this from him. Donut Buzzcut says, Episode 2 of The Crown makes it look like Prince Philip had just stopped playing polo and started carriage driving, when he had actually started in 1972, and he'd been at it for almost 20 years by that point in time. Also, Donut Buzzcut points out that Andrew Morton and Dr. James Colthurst first met in 86 when Princess Diana visited a hospital Colthurst worked at, and according to Andrew Morton, Colthurst's bicycle, which you were so interested in, Matt, it was knocked over not just on any street, but by the House of Parliaments, and it was Morton's work office that was trashed, in the idea that, maybe somebody's trying to get these tapes. Not his
was
home.
Wrong. I called it an apartment, Bubba. I called it an apartment. I apologize, Donut Buzzcut. Thank you for the correction. I am now fired. Bubba, the podcast is yours. See ya. Sweet Gav says, like the work that we're doing with the videos. Said, great. The camera angles were a great move. Bubba's been using that camera angle since I've known Bubba to use cameras at all. But I recently adapted simply because of the way my furniture is. And then as far as placement on screen goes, I'm an amateur, but hopefully you like the way that we've formatted the show a little bit. Really appreciate the comment. By the way, he does his own YouTube, Sweet Gav, so go check him out if you wish. Does unboxings of things like Xboxes and things like that. Unboxing an Xbox, that's a tongue twister.
We needed an unboxing video of Queen Elizabeth getting that cable system, that satellite system. Like, oh, look at this. Oh, how wonderful.
And then immediately handing the remote to William saying, how do you do this? We have gotten lots of podcast reviews over the last year as well, which I have neglected to read. So we have included you all in these contests as well. Bubba and I are just going to hit these real quick, one right after the other. Bubba, you start. I'll do second, and we'll go on from there. No, wait. I'll start. You go second. So I'm starting with The Matrix, and this one is just from last year in November, saying another hit. Listened before the latest season of The Crown and had such a good time, heart emoji. And the music coverage adds an extra layer of depth. Thank you. Great podcast ensemble. Highly recommended. Thank you so much, The Matrix.
We got a
for
great
that
review from Miss Susie. Miss Susie also gave us 5 stars. Thank you so much. Miss Susie wrote, great research on The Crown. One of the best entertainment review podcasts that I have ever listened to. Good cast, great games, knowledgeable information. I like this. There aren't many episodes, yet they're full of entertaining conversations. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Miss Susie. Santa Claus, Indiana says it would have been 5 stars, but instead was 4. But the double nonsense became unbearable. Please consider dropping it before the next set of episodes. The rest is quite good. Well, I've managed to fail on that. And it's not that the doubles are bad, Santa Claus. It's actually just that I overuse them. That's the problem. So you're right. I should tail back. Other than that, when Catfish and I do a podcast, it's nothing but doubles, and that can be really, really bad, as Bubba will tell you, according to his numbers. But
thank you very much for that review. We also got a great 5-star review from Naomi Burton with an episode with a review titled "Thank God." More recaps coming! ! It's like listening to the Algonquin Roundtable explain The Crown. Well done, you. Boy, that is so kind of you to say. Thank you so much.
Yes. And Joey 151785 also gives 5 stars, saying best Crown podcast available. Just started watching The Crown, and I love to watch the show, then listening to the thoughts and insights after the fact. And Lilibet does just that. I can't believe the lack of podcasts for this show with how popular it is. Any looking for insights, discussion, and more show, definitely check out this podcast. Thank you so much, Joey 151785.
Man, we should quit while we're ahead. These are such great reviews. It's all downhill from here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed they're all from before I ever joined in.
No, don't you say that. They haven't had time.
Just imagine how many more we'll get saying, Susan, dump the other 2 guys and do your own podcast. I'm sure that's what most of them are going to be. That's probably so. At any rate, we do have lots of polls to get through, so let's get through these real quick. We had a lot of debate questions last week, or in the last 2 episodes. Was Philip in his rights to ask Elizabeth to befriend Penny? This has happened before, but it's never happened before. 100% of you said no. Was the end of season 5, episode 5, too triumphant for Charles? 66.7% of you said yes. Something else that's never happened before, well, except for the fact that it happened last week. After talking to Penny, was Elizabeth crying? She never cries, of course, out of relief that nothing was going on between Philip and Penny, or out of sadness that she thought there was something going on between them. We had a tie. It's never happened before, except for when it happened last week. 50% of you said it was out of relief. 50% of you said it was out of sadness. And finally, perhaps the most important question that we asked and debated last week, if you're Boris Yeltsin, Scotch or vodka? Both? Or should have been a teetotaler? And it came back with 40% vodka, which got the most votes, but both and teetotaler also tied with 30% of the vote. Scotch got 0%. We're up to season 5, episode 9, couple 31, written by the only person who seems to write any episodes this season, and that would be the showrunner, directed by the one name that everybody hates when I try to pronounce, Christian Schwochow. Schwochow. I think if I said it in a native language, it would actually be Schwochow. Never mind. Here's your 64-second recap. It's all about divorce as we see the day-to-day operations of divorce proceedings through one particular court and several cases of couples expressing why they wish to dissolve their marriages. Speaking of which, Elizabeth writes to Charles and Diana and tells them that she will not fight them getting divorced themselves and informs the church and state of the same. Diana has lost her heart surgeon, and Charles will have lost a great deal of money if Diana has her way. Don't worry, Mama is paying for it. Camilla has gained unwanted house reporters and a spin doctor named Mark Bolland, while John Major has gained a new job as mediator to the divorce and a domestic coolness within his own home. The Prime Minister ends up mediating successfully thanks in part to Bolland advising Charles and Camilla. Papers are signed, but shortly afterwards, Charles comes to Diana and together they have a meal and try to make sense of it all before things blow up again. We get a little double S, stamped symmetry between Elizabeth at the beginning and the courts at the end as couple 31, Charles and Diana, are officially pronounced divorced by the judge. Somebody give that wheel a spin.
Big money, no whammies. Ooh, here we go. It's a question about Princess Diana and the divorce. It's what is the right amount of money that Diana should get in a divorce? Now, I'm not great on the conversion rate of dollars to pounds, but I would say just looking at it, she's got to have a huge divorce settlement. She's going to have a security system, needs a security system like you wouldn't believe, with the paparazzi, the people who probably would, want to get close to her and her children and her family. So I know Charles complains about it so much in this episode, but it has to be astronomical. And when you hear those numbers in this episode, it sounds astronomical, but in the back of my head, I was listening to it thinking, yeah, that's probably about right. Did you guys have any thoughts, or can you do the conversion of dollars to the British pound of what it should be?
This is at today's exchange rate, Bubba, but it would convert to $43,098,125.
Whoa!
So that's a lot of money, but it's less than Aaron Rodgers would make next year, or that he made this year. So,
well, I say we make Aaron Rodgers live with Prince Charles for a bit and see how that goes. Excuse me,
yeah,
King
I bet he
Charles.
would demand a lot more than just $50 million if that were the case.
Now, was the conversion you were doing for her the settlement of 17 million, or her original asking of 35 million?
The original asking of 35 million is what I was.
Okay.
The 17 million would only be about 20 million, maybe somewhere in there.
I like how you said the word only. My goodness. These are astronomical numbers.
You're a rock star like me, Bubba. This is nothing.
Hey, heck yeah. All right. Finally, the truth. Did it make you think less of her that she was asking for so much? More than anybody listening to this podcast?
Oh, well, dude, let's consider
99%
what settling for $17 million in 1997 is as compared to now. That's kind of like settling for probably about $29 million in today's world. So that's a lot of money to settle for. But if you're considering a one-time settlement and then the 400,000 pound stipend, that's not that much for someone who is basically required to live that kind of lifestyle just to keep herself safe from the rest of the public. You brought up some of those points earlier. I don't think that that's a ridiculous ask. I didn't feel any less about her. Did you, Susan?
No, I didn't. And quite frankly, when we get into such large sums of money, it becomes kind of unrelatable for me anyway. So I just kind of glaze over at this type of thing. It could have been 17 million, or we could have been talking about today. It seems like we are always throwing around billions of dollars for people. So it didn't seem like an astronomical amount, but it's also kind of hard to relate.
Right. If it was today, she'd get half of it in Bitcoin. So it's real good that it's not.
Oh boy, she'd be in bad shape then, wouldn't she? Like I said, I don't think there would be, I would have any issue with that kind of money being given to her. I certainly don't think any less of her, because you made some excellent points in the kind of lifestyle that she basically is required to lead in order to keep herself safe. When you're Princess Diana, you don't fall out of the limelight ever. So a one-time settlement and then the stipend, I feel was fair. Did you feel it was fair?
Again, it just seems, like Susan said, unknowable. You couldn't know what it would really be like to live like that. And I do wonder, I mean, yes, you're going to spend a lot on security and travel and these kind of things, but I would think there's got to be a way that you can do it for less than that.
Well, and you take into the fact that she's still getting to keep her well secured home at Kensington Palace as well.
Right.
So that's not so much the issue if she wants to live there for the rest of her life. Do you really want to live around Margaret
Well,
and all of those other cronies?
what's the mortgage on Kensington Palace? What's the HOA fee? I mean, holy smokes! I mean, this is a lot of money. Let's be honest. Holy smokes!
Well, and I mean, it's not like it's coming out of Charles's pocket anyway, because in this episode, Mama says she's going to pay the stipend, so it's kind of like, right? When she says on the phone call, I think she says that she's transferred the money and all of this stuff, so it's not costing.
Yeah.
It's not costing him anything.
And when he was complaining about it to Camilla, he was talking about the Duchy of Cornwall or something like that,
Right.
which I wasn't even familiar with that. So I looked that up, and apparently that's an additional title and income that Charles gets from a particular part of the of England as the crown prince.
See, for me, all the title stuff, because she got to keep Princess of Wales, but she was no longer allowed to use her Royal Majesty, I believe.
Her Royal Highness.
Her Royal Highness, pardon me. Yeah.
HRH.
HRH. Yeah, she had to drop the HRH.
Right.
So, I mean, yet you're still a princess. I don't get it.
Well, that had been a big contention for
for David, Edward, yeah.
Yeah, for his wife. It was a big contention all of their life because she really wanted to have that HRH as part of her title, and they refused to give it to her. So apparently, that's just for the very...
Well, they didn't even give her the Duchess title at first, did they?
I think she got that, yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But she didn't get her Royal Highness part of it that she wanted as part of the title. So I guess that's just like an honorary that only goes to a few very specific of the people at the very top of the royal family.
Okay. Where did it land, Bubba?
It landed on Mark Bolland and his conversation with Camilla in Today's Light, talking about PR, having to need PR to just live your life. Any thoughts about this character? The one thing I had, and I'll go ahead and go first, is I didn't see him give any especially great advice in this episode. So I thought, wait, this is the Wonder Kid? This is the wise guy who's going to, spit everything perfect?
I don't know. I think going ahead with the divorce, Bubba, was a pretty darn solid piece of advice that he gave.
It was solid, but it wasn't, I expect brilliant thoughts, brilliant ideas, brilliant spin. Didn't it seem really like it seemed kind of common sense spin?
Well, common sense that nobody there in the room was having until, Charles was fighting that tooth and nail. So simply on the principle of what Diana was demanding. He wasn't even given in to the prime minister. The prime minister was basically saying the same thing. And he said, no. He just call Camilla and complain. That's a triple C. But I was thinking more about, and I'll turn this to you, Susan. Given the fact that Camilla actually tells Bolland, that she can't even say the words that she wanted to be queen. And now we know that her title is queen consort, of course, but she's still going to be technically a queen. These were, when you look at how Bolland was saying, this is the elephant in the room. This is actually what we need to do. This is why we need to get you out in front of there so that you can do this. Do you find Bolland being very having foresight in terms of that, or do you respect Camilla for understanding how delicate that could be?
Yeah, I looked up a little bit of information about him, like I did with the BBC guys, to know a little bit more about his background, and they did talk about how he had helped bring her into the public in terms of he orchestrated like the first public event that Charles and Camilla attended, and the first public meeting of Camilla and the Queen, and dealt with things like getting people to stop referring to her as Charles' mistress and more as his companion or whatever, tried to take away, these kind of like derogatory terms in which she was viewed. So he did work really hard in some of these areas to make her more acceptable to the public, I guess.
Like Bubba says, though, we didn't really see any evidence of that in the episode.
True. Right.
On the other hand, we've got a whole season of, I'm assuming, 10 episodes. And we can talk about this in our finale podcast, but I just don't know what they're going to cover.
All right. Well, I am the podcast guinea pig in that I haven't even seen episode 10 of this season. And so I haven't seen it, but if they don't come back to Moo Moo and Dodie, excuse me, boy, I am going to be so frustrated with episode 3. I'll never end. I'll never forgive episode 3 of season 5 to introduce these characters who have nothing to do with the rest of the season. It's like, oh my goodness gracious. That's my point. I'm going to stick to it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I won't spoil you on anything. I'm just saying that there's going to be some interesting choices made for season 6 based on where they're leaving season 5 off of. And that's what makes me wonder how much of this character are we going to actually see.
The character being Mark Bolland?
Yes, Mark Bolland.
Yeah. This might be just a one-off.
Yeah, could very well be.
He's got to get back to Sandington and ruining that lovely relationship on PBS. Spoiler alert for Sandington season 2, maybe? I don't know. Spin the wheel, Matt. Spin the wheel. Come on.
All right. Okay. So this is something that Susan brought up in our leader questions. And that is the whole let's visit other couples and see how they are. And Bubby, you expressed a little bit in our initial ratings about how you felt about that. I'll be honest, Susan, your comparison with Harry Met Sally didn't even dawn on me until you brought it up. But once you did, now I can't unsee that. And I'm just sad. I'm just very, very sad. Now it's like the exact opposite of the upliftingness of those little couple stories. And when Harry Met Sally, now I've got the exact opposite. And I'm just down.
They should have, Matt, number one, for not recognizing the parallel to When Harry Met Sally. You might have to go into podcast jail for a bit. It's pretty blatant. And then number 2, they needed to go the final step. They needed to go the final step of Diana watching some of these couples getting divorced and saying, I'll have what she's having.
Or the final wrap up. The final little wrap up interview with Charles and Diana sitting down for their little interview, like all the other couples.
Oh,
yeah. Well, right. Yeah. Well, when we met, it was kind of doomed to that.
We were doomed from the beginning, and we lived our lives together doomed, and then we lived our lives apart doomed. Oh, but Susan, any other comparison there? Or I mean, how did you feel about the approach to this episode? Like I said, Bubba, you said yours, but Susan, how did you feel about the way this approach? Did it work for you?
It was okay. I didn't mind it. I was trying to watch the couples and see if there was any common thread between what they were saying in terms of what drove them apart. It seemed like there was an awful lot of the men were too. It seemed like in all the couples that they showed that the men were too involved in their work, and the women were wanting them to be more socially involved with their lives. It seemed like that was the situation with almost all of them. So I was wondering if for some reason they went that direction. I don't know or not, but yeah.
And how that relates to Diana, because again, we talked about it earlier, the isolationism.
Right.
That all of these women in these cases are basically suggesting that they feel that they're feeling. So, except for the one guy who's just jealous and wants to have a baby. He's too involved.
Yeah.
Well, Matt,
That's the other side of Charles.
Matt, this wasn't in the episode, but it kind of went up against just my own personal philosophy. And this, a couple of times, it felt like in the divorce counseling, they would say, "Oh, we just grew apart. We just grew apart." And a part of me is thinking, people don't. One of my own beliefs is that people really don't change that much in their whole lives. And so I'm thinking, when I hear that, I think, no, those issues were probably there at the beginning of their relationships, just like they were with Charles and Diana. And it's that circumstances change to bring out, kind of the natural conflict that was always there, the natural disharmony that would have always been there. So it was interesting hearing that and seeing that. And really, once again, even though I don't ever believe Charles just showed up at the palace and is like, "Hey, let's hang out, let's talk. Oh, let's get some eggs." That doesn't feel like something that would really happen. But I think getting these two characters in a room together where they can really kind of talk through things, even if it rehashes old, disagreements and incompatibility between them, I thought the show needed it. And so even if it was made up, once again, for a television program, I'm glad they did it.
For me, just the whole agony of the negotiations and all of that was enough. And to me, it felt like that's all the story that they really needed to tell, but perhaps it wasn't enough for an episode. And this was a cute little way to kind of try and tie other things into it just to make the episode longer, because I didn't find anything metaphorical or really interesting about any of the couples. Sorry, I'm cold. I'm heartless. I'm an old crone who just waves his cane at the television set. But I don't know. I could have taken it or left it, is my point, I suppose.
One observation I had was about John Majors and his marriage, because
Mhm.
as he was having that conversation with his wife about being asked to mediate with Charles and Diana, it seemed like there was some issues there between them, where she was really, disappointed with him that he wasn't kind of picking up on clues that she wanted him to be spending some time doing something activities with the family. So it just felt like, okay, here's another marriage that is having issues in this theme of this episode.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that was one of those things that really stuck out to me as well.
The one thing, just bringing up John Major again, the one thing that is as an outsider who wasn't living through this real time in history, it really feels like this show has really painted him, and admittedly many of the prime ministers, in a really flattering light. Yes, he I'm glad you mentioned it, Susan. He looks like he's not attentive to the signals his wife is giving out in this episode, but otherwise, they give him that line about, "Oh, try to look underneath what Charles is trying to say." He's trying to say, be happy, but do it discreetly, or however he phrased it. And it really did. The whole season has painted him in a very positive light. And I find that interesting. I really wonder what his approval ratings were like back then.
I have no idea. I know that all of that was completely fictionalized. It didn't occur, according to radiotimes.com. The other thing that I would say is that as far as Peter Morgan has gone, I remember all of this stuff, from the Queen movie to everything else, has been based on a play that he did, which was about the relationship between Winston Churchill and the Queen and Queen Elizabeth.
And I'm even forgetting the previous season of The Crown, where it was a very well-rounded, I guess is the one way you could say, describe kind of portrayal of Margaret Thatcher. And so maybe that wasn't all entirely flattering either. So as I think back, maybe it hasn't all been sunshine and rainbows.
Yeah.
No, but I think they've done a great job of including all these different prime ministers and how very different they are in their approaches and personalities and so forth. So I've really enjoyed that part of the show.
Yeah, they're definitely essential as characters to make this story kind of flow, because if you're just following the queen from day to day, I feel like that's pretty boring.
Yeah.
If you introduce all of these subjects that come with the prime minister or through the prime minister or what have you, then I find the story more dramatically compelling than I would otherwise, I suppose. I know Bubba's all pro, just give me Queen 24/7, but
Well, I just love how I would love for you to be her personal secretary. You know, just following you by yourself, Queen, is real boring.
yes.
There go the downloads in the United Kingdom.
You know
Thanks
what?
for
If I was
nothing.
Tommy Lascelles, I could say exactly
Oh,
that
my
and nothing would be
goodness
said.
gracious,
I could look
hater.
straight down my nose at the queen and say, "You're boring." And that's the way you should be. Let me take care of the rest. That's what Tommy Lascelles did. Come on. Anything else on this subject? No. Do we have a parliamentary debate for this episode?
Bum, 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 bum.
Yes,
Well,
we
Matt,
do.
Matt, you're supposed to read it because Susan and I have
That's
not
right.
debated.
You and Susan have to debate it. So I'm going to try and read this question. And this is probably the most important question that we'll ask all day. What is more difficult? To ask the same questions and make the same declarations, case after case, day after day, or to have to wear a powdered judicial wig for more than 2 hours straight? Susan.
I get to pick.
You get to pick.
Which is more difficult. Well, I'll have to go with the questions and declarations, because I'm sure that can get pretty tedious with these hundreds, and I guess, as even the show said, thousands of divorces that have gone on before and after Charles and Diana's. So I'm sure that can be a pretty dull and tedious activity for someone who spent their life maybe learning to get involved in the law, probably wanted something a little bit more glamorous and interesting to be dealing with than these mundane divorce cases.
I wanted there to be a dramatic pause after that so people could just think to themselves, tut, tut, looks like a failed argument. No.
No.
You think, oh, it's so difficult to ask the same question and make the same declaration day after day. Have you not been listening to this podcast? Matt has been asking you to like and tweet and subscribe like constantly in this podcast. Forget day after day and look at how robust and alive he is. No, he makes it look fun. And so obviously it's much more difficult to wear a powdered wig. Think of it, powdered. What have you looked at powders in our world recently? Talcum powder can kill you. Just ask John Stossel. I mean, you've got danger in your wig. And I don't mean WHIG, as some of the former leaders of the England were. I'm saying powdered wigs. So for 2 hours straight, you accidentally cough, and then more dust falls out of your wig, and then you cough again. That is tough. The lungs are an important part of a human body. Just ask anybody without any lungs. They won't be able to respond. So obviously, wearing a powdered wig for more than 2 hours. I mean, we're talking like, this is England. You probably have to work 12 hours straight just to be able to, so you don't have to work in the coal mine. So I say that is more difficult than asking the same question every day.
Well, I talked about doing the same thing every time, and here I do it again. We're going to put this poll up on the Twitter at Lilibet Pod on Twitter, Lilibet Pod on Twitter. You'd be amazed how many times I screw that wording up and have to edit myself. Also, Matt's audioblog at gmail.com if you have any thoughts about this or about any of these episodes. We do want you to get your feedback to us by February 6th, 2023, in order to be included in our contest where you could win one of 4 fabulous books. There's a double F in there somewhere. Sorry, Santa Claus, Indiana. But the whole idea of just you submitting feedback and telling me how wrong I am about everything thrills me. It really does. It thrills me. It gives me great pleasure to read your hate or your love for Bubba or Susan, who do fabulously on this podcast. So be sure to tweet at LilibetPod, send emails to mattsundayblog@gmail.com, leave comments on those YouTube videos because we gather that information as well, and we can include you in the contest from there. Find all of the videos, all of the great podcasts that Double P Media does in one single spot. How cool is that? It's the YouTube video channel, youtube.com/C/ the word double, the letter P, the word media. By the way, folks.
Okay, hearing Matt do that, I think you were right, Susan. It is more difficult.
I was just going to say that. Here's your history notes for season 5, episode 9, couple 31. Here are your history notes for season 5, episode 9, couple 31. In real life, Diana was reported to have agreed to divorce Charles in February of 1996, with a final agreement then reached on August 28, 1996. Diana was granted a financial settlement and retained both of her apartments at Kensington Palace and her title of the Princess of Wales. In exchange, she gave up her use of the title Her Royal Highness and relinquished any future claim to the throne. Prime Minister John Major's involvement in the couple's divorce proceedings in 1996 appears to have been entirely fictionalized. Sources: RadioTimes.com and TownandCountryMag.com. Mark Bolland, just 30 years old at the time, was tasked with rehabilitating Charles's public image and his highly publicized and polarizing divorce from Princess Diana. At the center of the scandalous breakup was Camilla Parker Bowles, who the so-called, quote, spin doctor worked tirelessly and allegedly at the expense of some other royals to bring her into the good graces of the public, who largely saw her as the, quote, other woman. Source: Bustle.com. Everybody has survived me talking through yet another podcast they've tolerated. They've even listened, maybe. They've never agreed, but they've at least listened, and I appreciate that. Any final thoughts about these 3 episodes, Susan?
I did share a couple of articles with you, but I think I'm going to hold off on those. And if you want me to come back for the finale, I'll think they might be more appropriate for discussion at that time.
Okay, there we go. We will save those then. You will find any links that we talk about in the history notes or wherever else in our show notes. So be sure to check those out if you're somebody who's interested in that information. And Bubba, any other final thoughts about these episodes?
Well, I just want to focus on these episodes because it has been such a thrill. I really hope, listeners, you don't mind listening to somebody who doesn't know a lot of this history or facts, or almost is trying to remove them from my enjoyment of the show so I can just judge the show as a piece of entertainment, a work of art. And I've really enjoyed these last 6 episodes so much. I can't wait to find out how the seasons end, how the season is going to put a bow on it. The season, to me, always seemed to end in almost like a family gathering and a family portrait. And can you have that when an important member of the family, such as Princess Diana, is no longer a part of it? I can't wait to talk about it on the next podcast. So, Matt, hey, I'm ready. Let's go.
All right. Thanks so much for joining us. We will be back again for one more episode where we will discuss the finale, give our final season thoughts, and look forward to season 6, and draw 4 winners of our contest. We'll see you next time on Podcast Lilibet.